Welcome to About Scripture, a podcast designed to take the listener deeper into Scripture and biblical thought. This podcast is brought to you in partnership with Heritage Christian University, where we help students to thrive in ministry. To find out more, go to hcu.edu. We're also partnering with the Ministry League Network. And now, welcome to the podcast.
Last semester, which was, 3 months ago or so? Is that right? 2 days ago. I was going through the book of Daniel. I didn't get done, so we're going to start back up with it. So I got through chapter 9. We're in chapter 10 now. That's what we're doing for the next couple of weeks, few weeks here in my chapels. So Daniel chapter 10. This is the final vision of the book of Daniel. We have Let me remind you of how the book of Daniel goes. The first 6 chapters are the stories you learned when you were 3 years old, and the last 6 chapters are the chapters you still haven't read because they are confusing and you just skip them. They are the apocalyptic visions. It starts in chapter 7, and we have 4 apocalyptic visions in the back half of the book of Daniel. We've gone over the first 3. They are weird and confusing, though they are important. The one we went over last was the prophecy of the 70 weeks, which I would say is the weirdest and confusingest. All right. But we did that last semester, so we're picking up in chapter 10. This is the final one. So it's the 4th and final vision in the book of Daniel. It lasts 3 chapters. The real part of the vision, the real heart of it is in chapter 11. It's a long chapter that we will talk about next week. So today it's just chapter 10. It's the setup of the final vision. All right. Daniel in chapter 10 has returned now, as was read for us. He has returned to his earlier diet of vegetables and water because he has been mourning, he says at the beginning of this chapter. It happens, by the way, in the 3rd year of King Cyrus, which if you crunch the numbers and map out the dates, this is the latest in the book of Daniel. All of the visions are dated, and so as you would expect, perhaps, this is at the latest part of the book of Daniel. If you want to imagine, if you want to imagine Daniel and what age he would have been, I suppose he would have been really old at this point. I don't know, 90 maybe? Something like that. All right. So he's doing vegetables and water again because he is mourning. He does not tell us what led to his mourning. Is he mourning over the sins of Israel? Has someone close to him died? He does not say. But later, the man that visits Daniel says that Daniel had set his mind, this is verse 12, had set his mind to gain understanding and to humble himself before his God. All right, this man, who I don't believe is ever called an angel, but we all think he's an angel, don't we? So I'll just call him an angel probably. This angel that is sent to Daniel says, the reason I was sent to you is because you were wondering about something, and I have come to tell you about it. So I guess that has led to his mourning, that he has been mourning somehow that is connected to his wondering about something. What was he wondering about? What was it that Daniel wanted to understand? Well, the man says again, this is verse 14, I have come to help you understand what is to happen to your people at the end of days. So I guess that's what Daniel wanted to know. I assume Daniel was thinking, okay, the exile is over and it doesn't seem like things are really all that much better. What are God's plans? And so this man was sent to explain certain things to Daniel. The man says that he will reveal to Daniel, this is verse 21, what is inscribed in the book of truth, or the writing of truth, or the scripture of truth. I guess that image represents the future as already written in a book. And Daniel is now going to be privileged with a sneak peek at that book. So Daniel sees a vision in chapter 10. A man with a distinctive appearance who has brought him a message. Daniel tells us that, this is verse 7, the people who were with me did not see the vision, though a great trembling fell upon them, and they fled and hid themselves. This is not the only story in the Bible in which there is a strong spiritual presence in a certain location, but not all of the people in that location are equally aware of that spiritual presence. Some are more attuned to it than others. You can probably think of some examples. I think of the example of Balaam and his spiritually perceptive donkey. That's Numbers chapter 22. Or Elisha in 2 Kings chapter 6, who asked God to open the eyes of his servant so that he could see that they that be with us are more than they that be with them. Or you might remember that callous Pharisee on his way to Damascus on a mission from the high priest, who was suddenly blinded by a great light and heard a voice addressing him, while his companions only heard indistinctly a sound. Y'all might remember the name of that callous Pharisee. You can read his story in Acts chapter 9 or chapter 22. What Daniel sees is a man clothed in linen. This is chapter 10, verse 5, whose appearance is described in some detail. Chapter 10, verses 5 and 6. For Christian readers, the description of this man in linen is reminiscent of the description of the Son of Man, given in Revelation chapter 1, verses 12 to 16, which is a description of Jesus. In the case of the book of Daniel, in Daniel chapter 10, the obvious guess is that the man in linen is an angel, and he may well be Gabriel, who has already visited Daniel a couple of times. His name isn't given here, but the connection with Gabriel comes at Daniel chapter 11, verse 1, where this man in linen mentions the first year of Darius the Mede. And maybe that's a reference to Daniel chapter 9, verse 1, where the same date is given, and Gabriel is the angel who comes to visit Daniel at that point. So my guess is we're looking at Gabriel here. The man in linen has come to help Daniel understand what is to happen to your people at the end of days. Verse 14. This revelation that the man in linen brings is the content of Daniel 11, and we'll get to that next week. For now, we will consider not the message that the man in linen has come to tell Daniel, but rather what the man in linen says delayed his delivery of the message. That's really the main interest, I would say, of Daniel chapter 10, is that this man in linen says, I was trying to get to you, I was delayed a little bit, and let me tell you why I was delayed. So we're going to talk about why this guy was delayed. This is verse 13. The prince of the kingdom of Persia opposed me 21 days. Now, you should relate this to the idea that Daniel had been mourning for 3 weeks, right? So 21 days that the prince of the kingdom of Persia opposed me. He says, still in verse 13, so Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I left him there with the prince of the kingdom of Persia. All right, so that's verse 13. Now let's skip down to verse 20. Then the man in linen said, do you know why I have come to you? Now I must return to fight against the prince of Persia, and when I am through with him, the prince of Greece will come. All right, that's pretty much all we get here in Daniel chapter 10 to try to help us work out what in the world is going on with these princes. I should say, if we know anything about history, though, we might know just a little bit more as well, that we have the prince of Persia, and then the prince of Greece will come. And if you just think about world history, you think about the Persian Empire is overcome by the Greek Empire. So there probably that's come into play. That has some bearing on what is happening here. All right, so who is the prince of the kingdom of Persia, and why is he in conflict with the man in linen? Probably, well, I don't know. Maybe most of you have an idea of what we're talking about, and my guess is you're probably right. We seem, at least this is my guess, and most people, I think, we seem to be talking about angels being in charge of specific nations. After all, if the man in linen is an angel, then what sort of prince could oppose him? It must be an angelic prince. Moreover, Michael is a well-known angel, not only in Daniel, but also in the New Testament, Jude 9, Revelation 12:7, and in Jewish literature outside. He comes up all over the place, First Enoch and whatever. And the same term prince applies to Michael here as to the prince of Persia. So Michael is also a prince. He's an angel, but he's a prince. And so the princes, I'm guessing they're angels. Everybody guesses they're angels, right? That must be what we're talking about. Indeed, in chapter 10, verse 21, Michael is your prince. Y'all's prince, I should say. It's plural, y'all. Y'all's prince is, so it's not just Daniel's prince, but it's y'all's prince, right? Israel's prince. The people of God's prince. All right, so what does that mean? Michael is the angel who's sort of overseeing the nation of Israel, just like Persia has an angel sort of in charge of Persia, I guess, and Greece has an angel in charge of them. All right, angelic ruler. All right. Now, what does that mean? I don't really know. I've got some thoughts. I'm not sure how seriously to take these thoughts, but I think it's worth pursuing this line of thought just a little bit for a couple of reasons. It is one way of connecting some dots in Scripture, and thinking about these angelic rulers might help us understand some things about human governments, which we've already encountered in Daniel as something of a theme. So let's think about angelic rulers for just a second. I should point out that the word ruler comes up several times in the New Testament, especially in Paul's letters, as a label for angels. Can you think about passages where that happens, where Paul mentions the rulers, and he's probably talking not about like Pontius Pilate and Caesar, but he's probably talking about supernatural beings, the rulers that are angels, Ephesians 6:12, right? Our fight is not against flesh and blood, but against the spiritual forces, the rulers. Or Romans chapter 8, verse 38, where that term, and there are several other terms in passages in Paul's letters where that terminology is used, probably for angels. Let me go ahead and present an interpretation, and then we'll look for evidence for the interpretation. All right, so the idea in Daniel 10 may be that God set particular angels over particular nations, and maybe, now I'm going to use maybe here, because I don't know, I don't think Daniel really connects the dots for us, but we can imagine ways of connecting the dots. So what I'm saying is, I think it's helpful to think about what Daniel may be hinting at, but we shouldn't press that as if we now know what Daniel means, because we don't. He doesn't give us enough information to be super confident about it, but he gives us enough information to be provocative and to get the wheels spinning. All right, so the idea in Daniel 10 may be that God set particular angels over particular nations, and maybe some of those angels, going even more of a stretch, maybe some of those angels rejected God's authority and misled the nations under their control, perhaps arranging for the people of that nation to worship the angel as a god. And maybe that has something to do with the conflict among the angels that the man in linen reports. All right, so do you see, just from Daniel 10, we've got some dots and we're already starting to connect them. Now, we've gone way beyond just what is reported in Daniel 10, but, at least to me, I can see how we could get there. So let's imagine we've got angels in charge of these different nations, and we've got to now explain, if these are angels, why are they in conflict with each other, right? Because the man in linen reports that he's about to go fight the Prince of Greece. Why are they in a fight? And why has Michael come to help him sort of hold off the Prince of Greece so that the man in linen can come to Daniel, deliver this message, and then go back and rejoin the fight? It looks like these angels don't like each other very much. And if we're going to say that Michael is like a good angel on God's side, and if he's in a fight with somebody, well, I guess that guy he's fighting with is not on God's side. And if that guy that Michael is fighting with is an angel in charge of a nation, maybe that angel is in rebellion against God. And so maybe that's how to sort of get there, to explain what is happening here. It's not all in the text, but there are hints that sort of get there. Now, are there other passages of the Bible that might make us also think that this is the kind of thing that sometimes happens? Yeah, there are passages in the Bible that might make us think that. We have talked about these things in chapel. Now, maybe not all of you were here. We have new students, for instance. But I did a series of lessons on angels a couple of years ago. So let me just read off some verse references for you to think about. In the Old Testament, especially Deuteronomy 32, verse 8. Now, what you're going to want to do when you look at that one is look at it in different translations, because it matters big time which translation you look at for Deuteronomy 32, verse 8, just what the thing says, what the text is. Different translations are going to differ. Did God, arrange the nations according to the number of the sons of Israel, or according to the number of the sons of God? And what are these sons of God, if that's the right reading? All right, I'm going to leave that there. I've talked about it before in chapel. I'm going to leave it there and just let you explore that, or you can ask me later. But so think about that in relation to Daniel 10. Think also about those descriptions that Jesus seems to be in John chapter 12, in the Olivet Discourse in the Gospel of John, where he seems to be talking about the devil, but he calls the devil the ruler of this world. Y'all remember that? Like John chapter 12, verse 31 is an example, chapter 14, verse 30, chapter 16, verse 11. The ruler of this world, he calls the devil. Now that's sort of interesting. Should we relate the devil to like a fallen angel? Should we think about the devil as a fallen angel? I mean, this will not surprise you that most Christians throughout history have thought of the devil exactly in those terms. So maybe that is related somehow to Daniel chapter 10. What about Paul's description of somebody in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4? He talks about the God of this age. Y'all remember that? Now, there is debate. There has always been debate on who exactly Paul is talking about. But I know a lot of Christian readers have thought he must be talking about Satan there. The God of this age has blinded the minds of the unbelievers. So he must be talking about Satan, and he's talking about Satan in terms of the God of this age, as if he is like the ruler of the world. Okay, so that's something to think about. That might also make you think about Revelation chapter 13, where the dragon calls up the sea beast and gives the sea beast power. The dragon, who is of course Satan, and the sea beast, who is of course, Rome, right? And so we've got an image, I know it's apocalyptic literature, but so is Daniel, of Satan giving his power to the leading political power in the world at that time, Rome. All right, so that's another thing to think about. And then let me give you one more passage to add to this collection as you imagine what the significance of this passage, all these passages are. Is Luke chapter 4. This is the temptation narrative. Remember what this, in Luke's account, the second temptation, the second thing he offered Jesus in Luke chapter 4, verses 8 and 9, Satan said, if you bow down to me, I will give you authority over all the nations of the world. And the reason we're looking at Luke and not at Matthew is because Luke's account has this little extra feature. It says, for they have been given to me, and I give them to whomever I want. Well, that's a weird thing for the devil to say. Now, of course, we know that the devil has been a liar since the beginning, and so maybe we shouldn't trust him. Maybe when he says they have been given to me, we should say, that's another lie from the devil. But maybe that's not where the lie comes. Maybe the devil's being serious about that. I think most people who have read that passage have imagined that he is in fact being serious, that we should take him seriously. They have been given to me, the nations of the world, that he is somehow in charge of them. There's a lot more to say about this, and I have no time to say it. It's 11:31. But one way of putting this together is to think that God put angels in charge of specific nations. Some of those angels rebelled. You should probably also think about Psalm 82 and this, think about that. Some angels rebelled, and that is what led to spiritual conflict, sort of behind the scenes, spiritual conflict that we cannot see. What do we do with this? Well, I have already emphasized, and let me emphasize again, I don't know if this is the right way of putting all this together. I am not going to say this is, with confidence, this is the way of understanding Daniel 10. I don't know. We only have hints. It is a way that a lot of people put it together, though. I'll say that. I'm not alone in this. So that's one thing. One thing I want to emphasize, I'm not confident about the interpretation. All right. A second thing I want to emphasize is whatever the interpretation is, what Daniel 10 suggests to us is that there are spiritual forces that we cannot see that are doing things that we don't know what they're doing. All right. And then the third thing I want to emphasize is that we don't really need to know what they're doing. What we need to know is that God is in control of everything. What we need to know is that God created all things, and our ultimate aim is to be united with God. And whether we recognize other spiritual forces at play or not, sometimes God seems to want us to recognize those, and sometimes it seems like he doesn't really care if we recognize them or not. Whether we recognize them or not, what we need to do is recognize that God is the ultimate authority in this world. Thank you.